Hey, we are done with our introduction week, and now we are moving into the topic and the work for our summary module. So if you look in the Module 1 folder assignment sheet, you'll see that we are doing two summary essays. Don't stress, they're going to be short. And because they're short, I want to do both of them on the same topic, so we have more time to learn about and discuss this topic. So in our when we're summarizing, right, we're taking the main ideas of an article and writing them so that people who read our summary can understand the content of the original. We're not expressing our opinion necessarily in it. We may do that in the blog some. But we voted on our topics, and for the summary essays, we're going to be doing the gender revolution. So when we think about gender, we need to make sure, well, with any topic really, that we're using the same words to mean the same things. Because if you're using this word to mean this and I'm using that word to mean that, we're not having an effective or helpful conversation. So I wanted to clarify some of this terminology as we're stepping into this topic. Now we may have this sense of, well, I know what gender is and I know what sex means, and but the whole point of the gender revolution is that these things are changing. Even if we go back 10 years, certainly if we go back farther, things have changed considerably. So it used to be that, a child was born and we looked at his body and we saw, okay, well, this is a girl. And so she lived a girl life and wore girl clothes and was allowed to do girl things. And then she grew into a woman who was allowed to do woman things and lived a woman life. And a woman was a woman was a woman. And that's it. And that's just not reality anymore. So when we look at this topic, a lot of times, people get defensive or they get upset that, this is just political correctness and it's unnecessary and these liberal snowflakes are just tiptoeing around blah, 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 right? But the issue is we're striving for accuracy. That when we talk about these things, we want to make sure that we're using the same words to mean the same things and that we're actually being accurate to reality. So under this video, I have an infographic. It's the genderbread person. This is the fourth version of this. So if you Google it, you'll see different versions of it. So we have this little, it looks like a gingerbread cookie. And it's divided up between our gender, our attraction, our physical, anatomical sex, and our gender expression on the outside of the body. Under that, you can see that all these things are on a continuum, right? So that it's not just this box or this box. It's that there's a spectrum, there's a variation, and that all of these have that cross out sign to say that, that there's also some people who don't have this. So if we start with what should be the simplest, that we think is the simplest, is the anatomical physical sex. So it's that symbol there at the groin. We're taught that an XX chromosome equals this kind of body, an XY chromosome equals that type of body, and there's just two options. That biological physical sex is binary. Only two options. Well, that is just not academically, biologically, realistically accurate. It's just not accurate. 1% of the population, which is as common as natural red hair, are born intersex. So imagine that we walked around in the world and said, well, you're either born brunette or blonde. And we ignored the fact that redheaded people exist in the world. Millions and millions of people exist who are born with red hair. And we just ignored that fact and pretended that hair color was a binary. That would be bananas, right? But that's what we do to the intersex population. I didn't learn about intersex people in anatomy classes or biology classes or any of that. So there's several ways to be intersex, right? You can be chromosomally intersex, hormonally, or anatomically. So for instance, one of my best friends was born. They looked at her baby body and said, that's a vulva, this is a girl. So she was living a girl life. And she was 18 and hadn't started menstruating yet. So her mom took her to a doctor and they said, oh, she doesn't have a uterus. Well, then they do more tests and they find out that she's XY chromosome. Well, biology class will tell you XY equals a male body, right? Testes and a penis and all that, the secondary sex hormones like not having breasts and growing facial hair. Well, here she was, a girl who was XY. She has something called androgen insensitivity syndrome. So the hormonal process that would change a developing fetus from female to male just didn't happen. So she is intersex, right? Because she chromosomally and anatomically isn't clearly this or that. There's also people who are hormonally intersex. So maybe you're XX and you have a female body, but your testosterone levels are in the male range on a chart, things like that. And then sometimes the anatomical sex just isn't clearly this or that. So even biological sex is not a binary. And we don't learn that. We just pretend that our intersex friends and neighbors don't exist. So that's our biological sex. And so we're on this spectrum, these continuum there. It's not two boxes. There's more reality there. Then if we go to the brain, we see that identity. So our gender identity is how we live in the world, how we mentally, spiritually, emotionally identify and move through the world. So if this is old news to you, bear with us. So if you are cisgender, CIS, you were born, we said that's a girl, and you identify as a woman, it lines up. Then there's transgender people who are identified as something at birth, but they identify as something different. Now, the important thing to remember, anatomical sex is not just a binary. Gender identity certainly is not just a binary. There are more options. Some people identify as male or female. Some people identify as neither or both, or they flop back and forth, or it's something different altogether. So gender identity is not tied to our chromosomes, our hormones, or our genitals, right? So this is our mental, spiritual, emotional way of living in the world. You can see that these are on a continuum as well. So womanness or manness, and there's the X, because some people say they're agender. I don't have a gender. Or you can bounce back and forth between those two continuums and say, well, I'm gender fluid. So, I go through phases where I feel and live like a woman, or I feel and live like a man. So you can exist on both of these arrows, not both of these lines, not just one. So then there is our attraction. That's our heart. At the bottom here in red, you can see what I like about this is that it is separated sexual attraction and romantic attraction. Because some people can fall in love with people that they're not physically attracted to. Or the other way around, that I can fall in love with a woman, but I could be attracted to a woman, but I could never fall in love with her, right? So that these are separate and different. A friend of mine identifies as pan-romantic homosexual. So he says, I can fall in love with somebody of any gender, pan-romantic, but I'm only physically attracted to men, right? You can see here that there's the cross-out sign as well, because some people are asexual. They're not attracted to any gender or any sex. But you can also see that it's not just identified by the gender identity or the anatomical sex. So you can be attracted to masculinity regardless of what body or mental gender it's on. So if I'm androsexual, I'm attracted to masculinity. It doesn't matter the sex or gender of the person. It's the masculine traits that are attractive to me, right? And then there is the dashed line on the outside of the body. This is our external gender expression. So this is how we express ourselves to the world. So this is, do we paint our nails? Do we have long hair? Do we wear makeup? What kind of clothes do we wear? Do we cross our legs when we sit in a chair? What color ink do we write in? What kind of car do we drive, right? This is, how we align with our culture's gender norms, or how we don't align with them. So the important thing about this is gender expression can vary tremendously through time and space. So if you go back to the 1700s in France, it was manly to wear tights and high heels and rouge and powdered wigs. Like, you were manly man. We would look at that and be like, high heels and powdered wigs and blush on my cheeks? That's pretty feminine. It wasn't at the time. in that culture and that time. So this varies tremendously. Even when we look at things like names, Ashley, Leslie, Stacy, these are historically names that were given to boys. These are now girl names in our culture, right? So this changes a lot. So when we're using these terms, we have to be aware that sex does not, like it says, sex does not equal gender. That does not equal our sexual orientation. That does not determine our identity or our expression. So we can see somebody who looks very masculine. We might assume that they're male. Well, they may be physically male, they may be physically intersex, they may be physically female. We don't know. And we don't know what their gender identity is. And even if we look and be like, well, that person has breasts but looks really masculine because they're walking around wearing camouflage and a backwards baseball hat, so we may assume, well, that's a woman and so she must be gay because she's very masculine. We'll assume things about her orientation, right? So it's very hard not to assume a person's gender or orientation. I mean, we're programmed that you look at the outside of a person and you deduce things about who they are, but we don't know unless we talk to them. And even when we're talking about anatomical sex, sometimes people don't even know they're intersex, right? My friend was 30 before he found out that his chromosomes were XXY. He's got three, right? And some people are mosaic chromosomes where some of their cells are XX and some of their chromosomes are XY. So even our biological sex, we may not even know that reality unless we have a full panel workup, right? So when we're using things, the word sex usually talks about the physical anatomy of the body. Gender means our mental identity, how we spiritually and emotionally identify in the world. Gender expression is the outside. It doesn't have anything to do with it. They may be XX or XY and identify as a man and have a man's body, but like to wear dresses. We can't assume that that means that he's transgender, that he identifies as a woman, or that he's attracted to men. It's a man who likes to wear that particular fabric. We can't assume anything else about him beyond that. So we have to make sure that when we're using these words, we're all meaning the same thing so that we don't have cross communication or misunderstanding. So if you have any questions about this, certainly let me know. If there's anything that you think I should have included in this discussion about terminology or about this this topic in general, send me a message and I'll share it with the class. And that's about it.